Before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to say that this is the season finale. So season 1 will be over when this episode is posted. I'm not sure when season 2 will be announced, but you definitely want to look forward to the announcement because each season we're going to have a new topic to discuss. This season was murders, and next season is undecided. I have some ideas, but I'm going to wait to tell you guys until the time is right. But there is a little change that will happen, but then no one kind of listened. I made a video called Go Subscribe to the Second Channel. That video didn't really get a lot of views. I'm just going to push this out there because these videos get views and you're going to have to listen to this because it's at the beginning of the video. This season is on this channel. Season 1 is entirely posted on this channel, but season 2 and the rest of the seasons are going to be posted on the Twitch channel. I need you guys to go subscribe to that channel so that way you guys can keep up with the Twitch. The Twitch will no longer be on this channel. This channel is going to be humor and like my regular like storytime videos and stuff. That's going to be this channel. But if you want more of these crime, murder, mystery kind of videos, just Twitch in general, or any other videos I decide to make with this type of genre, then make sure to go subscribe to the Twitch channel because that's where all these videos are going to be and they're no longer going to be here. Meaning the old Twitch videos, including this one, is going to be here, but season 2 and onward is going to be on that channel, and no other content about the Twitch will be posted on this channel unless I feel the need to post like a trailer or something. So please make sure to go subscribe to that channel if you're watching this video, if you want to keep up with the Twitch and keep watching these episodes. So yeah, let's get into this case. The Zodiac Killer. Everyone knows that name. Everyone knows the story behind it, and everyone is scared about it. It's just kind of a common saying and kind of a meme to say that the Zodiac Killer could still be out there. It would be kind of hard because this case is 52 years old, so this killer, supposed killer, would be pretty old and could be in a retirement home by now, but people still say it. But I'm here to say that maybe the Zodiac Killer wasn't a man. Maybe it was a cult. Like an actual cult? I hear you thinking that, watching that on your TV or your computer or your phone, and I was sitting here planning an episode and this theory just dawned upon me, and when looking over the evidence I really found that this theory fits really good. But before we look into this very solid theory and something that could blow the lid off this 52-year-old case, let's look at the victims and then let's go into the story. And then we can finally take a look at the evidence surrounding this theory and how this could be the missing puzzle piece that everyone has been looking for. The Zodiac Killer claimed to have killed 37 people. But when looking at the evidence and all the facts and taking a look at DNA samples from the body, it was agreed upon by authorities and police officers and everything that there were only officially and confirmed 7 bodies. 2 of the people who were attacked included in that 7 group did survive. Let's take a look at these people. The first victim we have on this timeline is David Arthur Faraday. And along with him was Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16. They were both shot and died on December 20th, 1968. Now, if they were shot on that day is unknown, but when the bodies were found, it was presumed, and the way that the flesh wounds were, that they had died recently. So it means, and people just kind of suspect and agree upon, that both of them died on December 20th, 1968, which is also when the bodies were found. Next, we have Michael Renault, and I'm not sure if this last name, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, it seems to be Majau, maybe? I'm not entirely sure, but I don't want to mispronounce it, so it's either Majau or Maju, I'm not quite sure. He was 19, and along with him was Darlene Elizabeth Farron, who was 22. They were both shot on July 4th, 1969. The 4th of July, like Independence Day. They were shot in a park. While Michael survived Darlene was dead upon arrival at the hospital. So he is one of the 2 people who actually survived the attacks. Next, we have Brian Calvin Hartnell, who was 20, and along with Cecilia Ann Shepard, who was 22. They were both stabbed on September 27, 1969. But, just like the last group, Hartnell, the guy, survived. But he didn't just survive, he was stabbed 8 times in the spine. And he survived. Kind of insane. But again, just like the last group, the female died of her injuries. Interesting. Lastly is Paul Lee Stein. He was 29. He was shot and killed on October 11th, 1969. So those are the confirmed victims. Now let's get into the suspected victims. This is a little bit of a longer list, but I'm going to go through it quickly, just kind of stating the names and the ages, just so we can get a kind of a basis on get in the mindset of what the authorities had to go through to kind of see, well, is this a person that was actually in the case, or is this person that was just disappeared or was killed in a similar time frame? So let's go into these. Robert Domingos, who was 18, and Linda Edwards, who was 17, was shot and killed on June 4th, 1963. See, they were both shot. And 2 of the groups from the actual list of confirmed victims were also shot. So I could see where they were kind of getting this mindset of this could be from the Zodiac killer. But if you look at the suspected one, it said that they were shot and killed on June 4th, 1963. But the first confirmed victim was shot and killed 1968. So there's a big time gap there, and I think this is really a main factor for why these people were kind of eliminated, is because they didn't fit the timeline. Now, this could be an actual person. Like I stated with my Cleveland torso murder case, episode 4, last episode, you should go check that one out. There's always a chance that this murderer could have been kind of doing a test on how the public would react to finding dead bodies in a certain condition. With the Cleveland torso murderer, there was a suspected victim and a confirmed victim that were both found in the same place. So my theory was that he was actually testing out the spot to see how easy it would be for the authorities to find the body, or how big the public would react to it, how popularized it would be if it was in the newspapers or anything. And because it didn't really get that much publicity, and the authorities found the body, but it just wasn't very popular, it was very possible that he was like, hey, no one really paid attention to where this body was. It would be a perfect spot for me to dump this body. So then again, this could have been kind of a test killing for this killer, or in my theory, this group of killers. But then again, you don't know, and you can't always rule something as hard evidence when it's just a theory. The next victim was nearly decapitated, and as we can tell from the hard evidence, this is not the Zodiac killer style, so we're not going to go into that one. The next victim after that was kidnapped and then later escaped. And again, the Zodiac killer never kidnapped anyone that we are aware of. But then again, it could have been a different member of the group, which is again part of my theory. But since they were kidnapped and escaped, and they didn't really have a good definitive description of the man that captured them and her infant daughter, you can't really describe if it's actually the Zodiac killer, and I don't think it was. So I'm going to skip the rest of the suspected victims, but the first one really kind of stuck out to me because it was very Zodiac killer style, and it felt like this could have been a test killing like from my other episode. So that's the one that we went into, but the rest I don't feel like match, and I feel like it's kind of a reason that they were suspected because they were close to the time frame and had similar styles of killings or kidnappings, but weren't actually fitting the bill. And I think that's why they're suspected. And I'm not going to go into them because I too feel like they don't fit the actual parameters of this case. So now this is just kind of special to this case because 1, this is a final episode of the season, and 2, the timeline for this case is very, very important. So we're going to go into each individual murder, and we're going to go into how they were killed or how they survived and stuff like that. So we're going to go into the timeline. This episode's going to be a little bit longer because there's so much to talk about. So let's get into the timeline. So we have our timeline. Number 1 event, kind of the cause of everything, the first domino that led to the entire Zodiac mystery and kind of suspense is the Lake Herman Road attack, okay? Now, we already went through the victims that were affected in each individual scene, but we haven't gone into the actual physical story and how they were shot and everything. We just kind of went to the specifics of who they were and just like a quick how they are included in this case, got shot, died kind of thing. So we're going to go into the actual attacks themselves. So the first attack was of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, the first group of victims that we discussed. They planned to attend a Christmas concert at a local high school, but instead they visited a friend, went to a restaurant, and then drive down Lake Herman Road. They parked their car in what was known back then as Lover's Lane, and by 11 p.m. the bodies were found dead. But after collecting evidence from the scene of the crime, they found that there was a truck or a vehicle that parked next to them, and it seemed that Faraday got out of the car and was shot as soon as he got out of the car. But then Betty was found 27 feet away from the car, leading them to believe that they were ordered to get out of the car, and as soon as David got out of the car, he was shot. She ran, and then she got shot 5 times in the back. And then, according to tread marks and everything on the ground, after that, the killer just drove off. Very gruesome and doesn't leave much to be desired because there's no hard, meaning behind it. It was just, he pulled up, they got out of the car, they were shot, and then he left. There's no note left. There's no sign left that's saying, this is why I killed you. There's nothing there. And that's really what ties people to this case, is because it's just so mysterious. It's just so, why? Next we have the Blue Rock Springs attack. This is the one that was set on July 4th, 1968 with Darlene and Michael, if you remember them. They drove to the Blue Rock Springs Park. That was just 4 miles away from the previous attack that we just talked about. When they got to the actual site, they parked. Not sure exactly what they were doing, but once they parked, a few minutes later, a car parked beside them, but then almost immediately left. And then a second car parked behind them about 10 minutes later. The passenger got out and came up to the car with a flashlight and a gun. The killer then walked away. He heard pained groans and sounds from the car, so he went back and shot them both again. He then got into his vehicle and drove away. Now, in this case, Michael actually survived. He described the killer around 5'8", with curly light brown hair and weighing about 189 to 200 pounds. He estimated that he was about 26 to 30 years old. Now, we're paying attention to this description because we have to make sure that they all line up, and if not, then this only supports my theory of multiple people. The very next day, someone actually took credit for the murders in the previous attack that happened 6 months earlier. What's interesting is that the phone that was used was only 5 miles away from Darlene's house, the girl that was shot in the car with Michael and who died. They asked the person at the gas station to, hey, is there anyone here that matches the description? He couldn't give any evidence, and they just couldn't track down who actually made the call. After that, after the 2 attacks, there were actually letters that were sent to police stations and publishers in that area from the Zodiac killer himself. Now, no one actually knew the identity of the Zodiac killer, and the public never really found out that it was a Zodiac killer. They just knew that there were these killings happening. The police hadn't really revealed any sort of evidence around it. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into these letters, but basically what had happened is that the Zodiac killer was sending kind of clues and hints and ciphers and everything to be published in these papers, or else he would just go off on a killing spree and just start killing everybody and racking up the body count unless these ciphers and mysteries were published in the front page of a newspaper. So he said that these clues and ciphers and everything kind of led to his identity, but they were so complex that they couldn't be solved, and they just put them in the paper finally, and these killings never happened. Now, this could have not been the Zodiac killer, but the way it's just almost teasing you, almost hoping that you find the identity, is very Zodiac killer-esque. And it's very trickster energy. It's very much how this supposed Zodiac killer would act, and it really gives, It really has strong vibes of this killer and definitely feels like it's from him, but we'll never know. Now, they counted this as official evidence from him, but could it be actually official evidence? There wasn't a thumbprint. There wasn't something that really tied this to the actual killer. But then again, no public information was released about the name of this killer or anything. So it also is very possible that it was. Okay, this next one is very interesting. And this kind of gives prudence to what I was saying earlier about descriptions matching from the people that survived. So I'm going to read this one word for word, just a small little paragraph, not the whole thing, but just to kind of tell you that these descriptions do not match up. So listen. So on September 22nd, 1969, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected by a sandpit to Twin Oak Ridge. A white man about 5'11 inches instead of 5'8", weighing more than 170 pounds, so this could be in the 189 to 200 guess, with combed greasy brown hair instead of curly light blonde hair. Interesting, right? Approached them wearing a black executioner-style hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like device on his chest that had a white 3x3-inch cross circle symbol on it. He approached him with a gun, which Hartnell believed to be a 45 millimeter. The hooded man claimed to be an escaped convict from jail with a 2-word name in either Colorado or Montana. A police officer later inferred that they had been referring to a jail in Deer Lodge, Montana, where Ed killed a guard and subsequently stolen a car, explaining that he now needed their car and money to go to Mexico as the vehicle had been driving was too hot. That did not match the other killings, okay? This man was shorter than this man. This man had different hair color. This man had different hairstyle. This man weighed differently. And this man did not dress in this almost costume like it was a different person. A different person. Like it was a different person. Because it was a different person. These are not the same people. I'm telling you this. These are not the same people. He didn't shoot them. He went into a very public place. He went to a park. He threatened them and he stole their car. The other guy wasn't interested in a car. He was interested in killing them. He didn't speak to them or anything. He just shot them. This man actually spoke to them. That is, they didn't take action until he tied them up. Now, he told Hartnell to tie the woman's bonds. He did, but then the killer found out that he tightened them a little too loosely. So then he tightened them. He just kind of stood there for a while, and then he stabbed both of them repeatedly. This matches the real Zodiac killer. But then again, you have to take into account his height difference, his hairstyle difference, his appearance, his height. Everything just doesn't match up. Because they aren't the same people. Killer then hiked 500 yards back to the car and drew the infamous Zodiac symbol on the door. He then wrote some sort of cryptic message underneath it that states Villaggio/12-20-68/7-4-69/Sept, short for September, 27-69-6, and then, 69-630/ knife. This seemed to be remember, they were killed on September 22nd. He was just describing the killings. This was almost like a line of code of his killing. And again, with this infamous Zodiac killer symbol. Now, I have a theory about the symbol, and I'll get into it later. But again, this matches with the Zodiac killer, but his appearance and everything else doesn't. At 7:40 p.m. that very night, he called the local police station and said that he would like to report a murder. No, a double murder. And then continued to say that he was the person who actually committed these crimes. They located the phone and was only a few miles away from a sheriff's office, yet it was 27 miles away from the actual crime scene. They were able to actually find a handprint on the cell phone. They took it, they ran it through their tests, and it didn't match anyone. A man and his son heard screams nearby. They went to go check. It was the people in the car. They then called the local police. They came, they got them. The woman fell unconscious and went into a coma on the way to the hospital and never woke up. But Brian was able to tell the story and give an accurate description to the authorities. So, again, the female died. The man lived to tell the evidence. Very interesting. This is the last attack that we're going to talk about, and it's the Presidio Heights attack. So this is 2 weeks after the previous attack we talked about. So it's October 11th, 1969. Okay, now this is very interesting. Listen to this. A white male passenger entered the cab, Zodiac killer, driven by Paul Steen, the victim, at an intersection of Mason and Gary Streets, 1 block west from Union Square in San Francisco, requesting to be taken to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. For reasons unknown, Stein, the victim, drove 1 block past Maple and Cherry Street. Now, this is, of course, unknown. Now, whether he noticed that this guy had some sort of weapon on him or he recognized him somehow as the Zodiac killer, we don't know. But he did drive 1 block past the actual designated destination. He drove 1 block past. The passenger then shot, so the Zodiac killer, shot Steen, the victim, once in the head with a 9mm, took Steen's wallet and car keys, and tore away a section of Steen's blood-stained shirt tail. The passenger was observed by 3 teenagers across the street at 9:55 p.m., who called the police while the crime was in progress. They observed a man wiping the cab down for walking away towards Presidio. 1 block to the north, 2 blocks from the crime scene, patrol officer Don Fook and Eric Selms responded to the call, observed a white man walking along the sidewalk east of Jackson Street, and stepping onto a stairway leading up to the front yard of one of the homes on the north side of the street. The encounter lasted only 5 to 10 seconds. This is where it gets interesting. So, one of the officers estimated that the white male pedestrian, the Zodiac killer, to be 35 to 45, so a little bit older than the previous descriptions. He was about 5'10", so in that 5'8 to 5'11 range that we've been looking at, with a crew cut hairstyle. So again, a different hairstyle. Somewhat similar, but slightly older than the description of the teenagers who observed the killer in and out of Steen's cab, the victim. As to be 25 to 30. So the teens were like, hey, 25, 30. Officer was like, no, 30 to 45. But this is really interesting. So the police radio dispatcher had initially alerted officers to be on the lookout for a black male suspect. So they just drove right past the Zodiac killer. And it's unknown why the dispatcher said that there was a black suspect when everyone else was like, hey, this is a white suspect. So whether this was someone on the inside working for the Zodiac killer, or there was some sort of mix-up with the dispatcher and the officers, we'll never know. But they were given the wrong information and drove right past it, which is kind of a coincidence because they could have caught him right then and there, but they weren't looking for a white suspect. They were looking for a black suspect. Again, just a coincidence that made the Zodiac killer just slip right out of their fingers. Just lines up with the handprint on, like an actual physical handprint, but couldn't be matched to anyone. Now, they at first kind of assumed that this was just a normal, not every day, it's not cool, but it just a regular cabbie killing. This happens a lot. But then, with the description of the teenagers, they then, at the police station, received a package with a little bit with the tail end of a bloody shirt. Do you remember that part? The Zodiac killer just ripped off the piece of the shirt, and now it's at their office, claiming to be the Zodiac killer, saying that he committed the crime. This sent the entire police station into a frenzy, and they looked into 2,500 different suspects over the course of about 5 years. After that, more letters and more ciphers from the Zodiac killer ensued and gathered and just added to the mystery and just got more confusion among officers and authorities. And no matter how much they looked into them and asked people, hey, can you solve this? They just couldn't figure it out. So we now have all of the attacks looked into. We have all the victims discovered. We have the story in place and everything. So now let's look at the suspects, and then let's dive into the theory. So, okay. Suspects. Arthur Lee Allen, one of the biggest suspects and one of the biggest suspected Zodiac killers out there. So, why, though? Why? This is interesting, though. Several police detectives saw Allen as a very good fit. He had a similar physical description and similar height, weight, kind of everything, and didn't have strong alibis for a lot of the dates. Now Allen again came to the police attention in 1971 when his friend Donald Sheeney reported to the police in Manhattan Beach, California, that Allen had spoken of his desire to kill people using the name Zodiac and secure a flashlight to a gun. For visibility, doing that for visibility at night when the people in the car were killed by a man with a flashlight and a gun. They then looked into him more and found out that he was on an honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy in 1958 and had been fired from his job as an elementary school teacher in March 1968 after allegations of sexual misconduct with students. In September 1972, they got a search warrant to search his house and found evidence that he was having sexual acts with 12-year-old boys. He pleaded guilty and served 2 years in prison. All the other evidence surrounding him wasn't really confirmed. The typewriter that was used to type the letters from the Zodiac killer was the same brand and year model that Allen had in his house. He owned and wore a Zodiac brand watch. He lived minutes from where one of the attacks took place and where one of the victims lived. If you remember Don Cheney, the guy who actually suggested that Allen could be the Zodiac killer, they brought him and Allen in. They took DNA samples and they ran them to samples from the Zodiac killer, from letters and from the handprint, and it found that they didn't match. But they stated that doesn't mean that it could have been, that doesn't mean that it wasn't the Zodiac killer. So that's interesting, that they're saying it could have been the Zodiac killer, but it wasn't them. So that's 2 suspects right there. Don and Allen are both suspects to me. Then, this is interesting, in 2007, a man named Dennis Kaufman claimed that his stepfather, Jack Terrence, was the Zodiac. Kaufman turned in several items over to the FBI, including a hood similar to the one worn by the Zodiac. According to news sources, DNA analysis conducted by the FBI and the items were deemed inconclusive. But then again, just because this DNA didn't match the Zodiac killer doesn't mean it wasn't. So I'm counting Jack Terrence, the stepfather, as another suspect. There's a whole list of suspects. So we've gone over the suspects, we've gone over the victims, we've gone over the attacks, we've gone over everything except for my theory that ties everything together, that the Zodiac killer was not a killer, but yet a cult. Here's what I'm thinking. A lot of the evidence leads to Arthur Allen, right? We've kind of gone over this, okay? I'm thinking that he was the leader. There was so much evidence surrounding him. I think he was the leader of this group. Here's what this kind of group is that I'm talking about. You have someone, and so first of all, Arthur said that he would go by the name Zodiac, okay? That's his thing. He wore a Zodiac brand watch and he had the similar typewriter. He kind of started this group called the Zodiac or the Zodiac cult, whatever it was, but it had something to do with Zodiac. Of course, that was his kind of thing, right? He had sick intentions. He had done things to children. It was just kind of in his it was just kind of in him to do bad things. So he started this group, and other people with similar sick interests kind of joined in on him, and they formed this cult. So what's another word for a cult? Well, following a group, a circle. Let's look at the symbol. So this Zodiac symbol, this is the symbol of the Zodiac killer. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 points saying that there are multiple ends, multiple people all coming together to form a circle. I mean, I'm not saying anything is hard evidence, but that's kind of fishy. That the symbol that's used to describe this infamous killer is almost describing a circle, a following, a cult. But out of all the evidence that's tied to Arthur Allen, there's no DNA evidence. There was no DNA evidence to anyone. So I feel like they had just some sort of outside party, someone in the group, but that wasn't very suspicious at all, to actually, put their DNA out there, put their hand on a cell phone, put anything out there that would be tied directly to one of the group members. Here's what I think actually happened. Jack Terrence, this was the older stepfather of Dennis Kaufman, okay? I don't believe Dennis was a part of this group. I felt that he actually found this in their house and was genuinely concerned. Jack Terrence died later on, and I don't think he just died, I think he was murdered. Jack Terrence got sloppy, he left evidence, his innocent stepson found the evidence, he released it to the cops. The leader of the group, Arthur Allen, discovered that he had become sloppy and led them on to this group, so he killed him. He just killed him. He was killing anyone that was tying it to them, because this group was all about trickster energy. This group was all about fooling people and causing people to be scared, and they're still scaring people to this day. The fact that the Zodiac killer is still out there freaks people out. They don't want to answer their door when they're home alone. They don't want to go outside in the night. They don't want to park their car in an empty parking lot, fearing that they're going to get flashlight shown in their eyes and they're going to get shot. That's sadistic. That's a mindset of a sick person or sick people. The mind of a person who would do sexual acts to 12-year-olds. It's the mind of a Zodiac killer. It's the mind of them, the Zodiac cult. Because they're sick and they want these people to be scared of them. That's their entire plan, to confuse you and scare you. And the fact that they're still pulling it off today just goes to show that their plan worked. Even if they were caught, it would still kind of press the fact that anything like this could be going on to this day. And there's probably some dark government shit going on right now that's similar to this Zodiac killer stuff. This could be tame compared to what the government or anything else could be doing this second. This just goes to show that something this big could be hidden so easily and could be dealt with so easily. Just take out the guy that leaked a few pieces of clothing. Doesn't matter. It's not like they're going to know that he was a part of this group. He's not going to lead them back to you because he's dead. You killed him. The Zodiac killer wasn't a man. It was an identity. So yeah, the Zodiac killer wasn't a man, just a cult. Who knows? Just a theory. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Took a while to make, and as of recording, we're at about an hour and 10 minutes. So yeah, like I said in the beginning of the episode, make sure to go subscribe to the second channel for season 2. Stay tuned for that and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I know kind of got serious in the end, but this was a scary case to look at and took me a while to actually gather the evidence, and this theory just kind of blows my mind. But like I said, it's just a theory. If you have any ideas or any evidence that you looked up that you found might not support this theory or even support it, leave it down in the comment section below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for the amount of support you guys are leaving on the channel recently. Stay safe out there. And just remember, through it all, the Zodiac killer could still be out there.